quantity thing, still with us today. People are still debating it, still trying to decide what's right look like.
I saw in the news recently there's a munitions shortage right now or something.
Yeah, I think because of the war in Ukraine.
One was like we have like $800 billion in military spending. Why do we have no ammo?
There's lots of complicated reasons. They're just starting a new plant in Missouri. They announced about a year ago they're opening a new munitions plant, but it's one of these cooperations between private enterprise and the government. But yeah, I don't think that one's up to scale yet, and it's hard to buy from the civilian market in America because civilian shooters use so much ammo. So I'm not sure.
About yesterday, how some politician who's blocking, like basically how military does their promotions.
Yeah, he's blocking it over some other issues.
Okay, yeah. So
I saw that.
I say it can screw up though, because like there's so many people that have to be moving up at a time for our military to be like adequately.
Right. Well, in some of those promotions, as far as I'm concerned, we have way too many generals.
Yeah.
In
so
all the
some more
services.
BS anyway.
There's far too many generals who've got BS jobs that we could just give some random colonel.
Yeah.
So that I'm not bothered by the 07s and above. I'm kind of bothered by everybody else. They should get promoted, but the 07s and above, we could do without many of them, in my opinion. Now here's another problem. So we had the unintended consequences issues. And let's say you make an early decision to adopt a technology, in this case, aircraft carriers. So what are the problems or the tyranny of early decisions? Well, these early aircraft carriers are so small, you can't carry that many aircraft on them. And at a certain point, well, what if you only have 20, 25, 30 aircraft, why spend all the money on this huge ship for such a tiny number of aircraft? That's a question that goes out there. The aircraft performance itself is compromised. Why? Because so landing on an airfield is a long, slow path. You touch down, you taxi, you go over to your hangar. Landing on an aircraft carrier is like this. Okay? You land very hard and you stop almost immediately. The stresses on an airframe, on a naval aircraft, are enormous compared to the stresses on a ground-based aircraft. So this means that a naval aircraft has to have a lot more reinforcement and things like that to prevent it from literally being torn apart in its landings. And if you look, like the F-35, so there's the three models of the F-35, which is the new fighter. The Navy one, and I can never remember which one's which, but the Navy one weighs something like half again as much as the Air Force one. So whatever that, let's say 10,000 pounds. I don't know what these things weigh. Okay, so I'm just picking a round number. 10,000 pounds. The Navy one weighs like 15,000.
Reinforcement.
Yeah, because it's all that reinforcement, because it's such a, you hit this metal deck and then boom, you stop immediately. Okay? It's very violent. It is a very violent action. And also the service hours you can get out of a Navy aircraft are shorter. So when they figure, this plane should last X number of hours, okay, before we have to change this or fix that, fix the other thing. Navy aircraft last a much shorter period of time than Air Force aircraft or World War II Army Air Force aircraft because of those same reasons. So much stress is being applied to these aircraft that they wear out quickly.
So the aircraft for carriers have to be lighter?
They have to be heavier.
Okay.
Heavier because they have a lot more metal reinforcing key structures so that when they land, they don't just crumple up. Well, that means your aircraft is heavier. A heavier aircraft is not good in flight because it means you're slower. It means you can't turn as quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So naval aircraft generally speaking, are not as nimble, not as good as ground-based aircraft for that reason. And then when you get into the V-stall kind of stuff, like the Harriers, everything that has a whole other bunch of complications involved, okay? Small production runs. Most of the early carriers in the 20s and even into the 30s, there's one of them. It's not the Nimitz. Like the Nimitz class, there were 10 or 12 aircraft carriers. And they were built over a 20-year period of time, starting with USS Nimitz, and I can't remember what the last one was, okay? And every one was a slight improvement over the previous. We built one, and then we started with the exact same frame, but then we go, oh, no, remember that was a problem, let's fix that. And then the next one, oh, it's a little bit better. So the final Nimitz class aircraft carrier was arguably the best, because you had been fixing it for 20 years, and it got better every time. In this case, the Langley, which is our first aircraft carrier, is a converted Collier. Then the second and third, the Enterprise and the Lexington. Anyway, whichever two they are, they're one-offs. And then we get an aircraft carrier whenever Congress scrapes together the money. So the production line closes down, everybody gets fired. Then 3, 4, 5 years later, Congress says, hey, we got money for a new aircraft carrier. And the Navy says, well, that's cool, but we got to start from scratch. Every single time. Now, I know the engineers are not starting from scratch. They pull out the old plans and stuff. But your production facility, your workers, all of that, you're kind of starting from scratch every single time.
Is that why we have no money for munitions? We keep spending it on like aircraft carriers and jets?
Well, let me put it this way: in a cost sense, the big ticket items are the Navy and the Air Force. The Army and the Marines are dirt cheap compared to the Navy and the Air Force. I'll just say that. Limited money for research and development, because again, it's the interwar period. Most countries are trying to save money. And on top of that, not only are our countries trying to save money, but you've got the situation where the Great Depression hits in 1929. So now you were already trying to shorten your budget, and the Depression hits, and it's now like, are you going to let people starve in the streets, or are you going to build an aircraft carrier? That's the start. I know that's not literally how it works, but that's the stark kind of thing you're forced to deal with. Okay. Yes.
Also, the president, he used the drawing sheet to look at.
Oh, exactly. You want to not get reelected in the middle of the Great Depression, say we're building an aircraft carrier, while 25% of the people were unemployed.
Yeah.
Hey, building aircraft needs workers.
And that's how he'll pitch it. And that's how Roosevelt will pitch it during the Depression, and that's how he'll get some carriers built. Is he'll be able to pitch it as, hey, California or Virginia or wherever the heck we build it, I'm bringing jobs to your district. So that's how he will actually get 2 or 3 through during that period of time for that reason. But otherwise, yeah, how do you sell that? Okay.
Wait, hold on. Were these ships fuel efficient? Like, what's the mileage on them?
No, they're not fuel efficient.
Oh.
No, ships are not fuel efficient. Not the way you think of like cars and fuel efficiency. It's the power plant is different. Yeah, it's very different.
Like, how often would it need to refuel?
Those videos are really cool when they refuel out to sea, like they have the lines.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. I couldn't tell you an exact number. So I would, no, I'm not even going to guess because I will get it horribly wrong. But I know they could make it at least to Midway, because that was one of the things. Midway was always a stop-off point, and it's midway across the Pacific, so you could at least get from California to Midway. I know you could do at least that, probably more, but I know you could do at least that. So, but past that, I will just embarrass myself if I say anything more, because I'm sure somebody will look it up on Wikipedia and I'll be totally wrong. So I have no idea how far they can go. Oh, this is a good one. Conversion of other ships into aircraft carriers. CV is the designation for an aircraft carrier. So, all right, let me do a kind of a fun little thing here, all right? Every type of ship has a designation. And destroyers are DD, okay? Battleships are BB. Aircraft carriers are CVs, and now they're CVNs. Anybody want to take a guess at what CVN stands for? And wait, before you answer, it's a trick question. So whatever you think, question yourself.
Nobody
CVN.
knows.
What's that?
Nobody knows.
No, people do know.
Command Vehicle Network.
Okay.
N is nuclear.
The N is nuclear.
Oh.
Okay? I tried to say that with a George W. Bush accent, but it didn't work. So that's nuclear. We got that one. C and V.
So
And it's not commander vehicle.
CB is battleship.
Destroyer, battleship,
Oh,
aircraft carrier.
and destroyer is bigger than the battleship. Oh.
No, destroyer is the smallest,
Oh,
almost the
it's-
smallest ships we have.
It's like a crusader.
They are designed to support battleships.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, so it's not commander and it's not vehicle. Everyone assumes vehicle.
Vessel.
No,
Is it class something?
no. Go back to this bullet.
Converted.
So it's been converted. It's not the word converted though. So what other type of ship do you think might have a C as its designator?
Cruiser.
Cruiser. Who said that? Cruiser. Yes. The second and third aircraft carriers we built were converted cruisers. Why? Because the Washington Naval Treaty said we can't have capital ships. So we had to scrap some battleships and some heavy cruisers. So they had been building 2 heavy cruisers. When they signed the Washington Naval Treaty, we can't finish those. They're half done. What do we do with them? We can build aircraft carriers. So they take those cruiser hulls that had been already laid down and they turn them into aircraft carriers. And the designation is cruiser. It's not vehicle or vessel. Believe it or not, V stands for aviation. Why? Because you can't make it a CA, cruiser aviation, because CA already means something. Want to take a guess at what CA already means?
Carrier aircrafts.
No.
Don't say California.
It's a what? They're called California, yes, but.
Don't say California.
So, C is still cruiser. What does A, do you think, stand for? Armored.
Oh.
Heavy. That's a heavy cruiser. Heavy cruisers were designated CA. And then you'd have CL for cruiser light, okay? Which is the, it's more like our pocket battleships, the cruiser light, okay? So, it's cruiser, aviation, why? V, because the next letter in aviation, I spell it aviation, yes, okay, is V. So they just skipped the A and went to the V. And since then, it's evolved to where V, in the Navy at least, I don't know if this is true in all the services, means fixed wing aviation. So nowadays in the modern military, if you use the letter V, you don't just mean aviation, you mean fixed wing aviation as opposed to helicopters. So yeah, this is complicated. But what's hilarious? The number of Navy officers I would do this game with. These are Navy officers at Leavenworth who've got 10 to 12 years of service who didn't know, except for the N, what that stood for.
I think everybody knows the N.
The N was easy because we added it
You would
later.
assume the C in a carrier would mean carrier.
You would, right, but we
No.
do still have cruisers at the same time, and so they know the cruisers are also Cs. Because right now, we still have some cruisers. We still have
Oh,
a
wait.
group of cruisers.
A new solution, we changed carrier so it's spelled with a K.
Oh, jeez. That could have been an option too. But anyway, so that's it. CVN is cruiser, aviation, nuclear. That's what they do nowadays. Obviously, they didn't have nukes in World War II or before World War II. Armored flight deck. This is a controversial decision. Should we have an armored flight deck or a wooden flight deck? Well, an armored flight deck protects you more, but it also weighs a ton more, which means it slows down your ship and it makes your ship top heavy, which means we have to, I don't know, do something with ballast. We have to balance it out so we don't tip over. Also, if you have an armored flight deck and a hole appears in that deck, it's really hard to repair out at sea. Okay? Whereas the wooden flight deck, it's easy to carry a bunch of wood, that's relatively light, and your carpenter's mates can easily fix it. The British, all of their aircraft carriers are armored flight deck. The American, all of their aircraft carriers are wooden deck.
Just don't deadhead.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's always a thing. So, why do the British do armor? Why do we not do? Well, where do the British expect to fight?
On the front.
Yes, I get that. But no, I meant where geographically on the planet do they
I
expect to
think it
fight?
was the Atlantic.
The Atlantic and the Med. Most of the time, pretty close to land. So if their flight deck was damaged, they could get to a port and get it fixed. Where do our carriers expect to fight?
Pacific.
The Pacific. In the middle of flippin' nowhere. If you haven't looked at a map of the Pacific recently, remind yourself how enormous it is, number one, and how little land there is, number two.
And I don't think those small islands have a shipyard.
No, no. In fact, during the war, we'll invent a floating shipyard that we'll use to repair these ships. We'll actually create a floating shipyard that'll be towed out to the Pacific to some of these islands so that damaged ships can go to the island and use the floating shipyard, floating dry dock technically is what it is, floating dry dock. So they can pull it out of the water, repair the hull, do whatever. So again, in retrospect, it looks like, wow, the British are really smart, we're really stupid.
No, really.
We're not that stupid. And plus, we really foolishly think no one's ever going to get to the carriers. I mean, the distances are so far that the planes are going to be fighting each other. They're never really going to get to our, because we've got destroyers to create flak to shoot down any planes. No plane's ever going to hit one of our carriers. Oh yeah, well.
So how many carriers did we lose?
2 or 3 full-size fleet carriers and another 4 or 5 what we call auxiliary carriers. They're CVLs, cruiser aviation light. So we have CVLs. They're akin to the modern day Marine Corps carriers, which technically are in the Navy, but the Marine Corps use them. Okay. Aviation fuel capacity. So you have to have fuel for your ship, oil mostly in those days, coal initially and then oil. You have to have fuel for the aviation, which uses a different kind of fuel. There are pipes everywhere on aircraft carriers. And you might have heard in the news recently, there was a problem, I forget what ship it was on, one of the carriers, where some of the fuel got into the water lines.
I'm
And
gonna say the one in San Diego that's exploded.
No,
Well,
it was the bomber shark.
Yeah.
I was on that ship in my last.
Yeah.
It sucked.
yeah.
Well,
Did they
no,
did they
no.
scrap it or are they trying to
They
fix
had
it?
to scrap it.
Okay.
They are decommissioning it anyways.
Yeah. So anyway, some of the aviation fuel got in with the water lines. And that is not the first time that happened. I had a buddy who was aboard the Midway back in the 80s. And the same thing happened. And he said the positive thing for him was after showering in the tainted water, he had a skin condition that cured itself. And I found out later what that was. The aviation fuel is kept in these huge tanks, in special tanks on shore. And they add an antifungal element to the aviation fuel to prevent it from getting gunked up. And so the antifungal element in this, my buddy showered in it for the 6-month tour and it cured his skin condition. So I literally was able to discover that and I emailed him and I go, hey John, guess what I just found out? And he emailed back, well, you know, goddamn, that's pretty interesting.
I'm
He
supposed
says,
to be amazed of these.
yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both.
Dermatology recommended.
There you go. The launch and recovery system, especially on one of those early carriers, is pretty lousy. You remember the one with the giant thing in the middle of the British one where it had the giant stack in the middle of the deck? Even when we start to have better ones, the launch and recovery system is very slow. It's not until we really get into the 30s that we get a better system for doing all that. So again, if you make the decision to adapt the aircraft carrier early, there's limitations, there's problems. So sometimes being at the cutting edge isn't that great. I mean, okay, if you bought an iPhone 1, now if you kept it, you're good because you can sell it for a boatload. iPhone 1s are like collector's items, especially if you still got the box and everything. But let's be honest, when you look at what the iPhone 1 could do, it had almost none of the features that the later iPhones do other than the touchscreen, okay? So you usually want to go not the first of something, the second generation, or maybe the third, before you really get all the good features of whatever it is. So, now, just for amusement's sake, I want to show you the 4 biggest battleships in the world that will fight in World War II by country. So, for the British, it's the HMS Hood. She was originally launched in 1920, but she underwent a major refit in 1940. You can see her size. She's got 8 15-inch guns, a max speed of 30 knots, which is pretty impressive. Almost 1,500 personnel aboard her. The Hood will be sunk, as you probably know, by the Bismarck. 3 men will survive the sinking. It's one of those lucky shots where it lands right on the magazine and blows the ship in half, and it sinks in like 10 minutes. 3 guys survive the sinking. The Bismarck, who sinks the Hood, okay, a little bit smaller, roughly the same armaments, same speed, larger personnel, okay. The USS Iowa and the Iowa class battleships. So ours are kind of halfway between the Bismarck and the Hood. We've got 16-inch guns and 9 of them, and a better speed, larger size. The Iowa, of course, will be mothballed after World War II, brought back for Vietnam, mothballed again, and brought back in the 1980s as part of Reagan's policy of having a 600-ship Navy. We never quite got it. We were at like 580 something when we scrapped that idea because the Cold War ended. By the way, we have less than 300 ships in the Navy today. So in the 1980s, we had 580 something. Today, we have less than 300.
Oh, that's unreal.
Yeah. And the most massive battleship ever built is the Japanese Yamato. 65,000 tons, so almost half again as big as the other 3. 9 18.1-inch guns. Little bit slower, bigger crew, but again, she was a massive, massive ship.
Premise of a lot of Japanese.
And a premise of a lot of Japanese anime. Yes. The Starship Yamato, I think. Isn't that what they call it in the thing?
Yeah.
So since we're talking about carriers, I just wanted to throw this in to show there's a lot of development going on here too. But World War II will prove that aviation beats
Yes.
battleships.
The Yamato is
It is in the bottom of the ocean.
yeah.
Okay, now, let's change gears slightly. During the interwar period, the 1920s and 30s, the United States creates a series of war plans. And by the way, we have war plans today, somewhere in the bowels of the Pentagon, and I'm not telling you this because I have access to them. I only had a basic secret clearance. I never saw anything. In fact, I never wanted to see anything because I was so paranoid I'd get in trouble for saying something later on, like, did you know? And forgetting where the hell I got that information from, okay? Right now we have a plan to invade, you name the plan, this country has a plan. There's a plan to invade the Congo. I mean, there's a plan to invade
Which one?
Rwanda. What?
Which one?
I don't know.
There's 2 countries.
That's right, there's the,
Canada.
yeah, good point. There's a plan to invade Canada, yes.
Does the U.S. Army make like a plan to invade China? Or
I'm sure there is.
Yes.
I'm
I'm sure
sure.
they're like
Just for that.
There's multiple, because there's probably a defense against China, there's an offensive plan, there's a defensive plan, there's multiple, like, do they attack Kauai? Do they attack the California coast? I bet you I wouldn't be
They
surprised
can
if
make a
there's.
plan, wait for the plan to be executed.
Yeah.
They'll wait the plan.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a dozen different plans just focused on China. And then there's probably a Navy version, an Army version, an Air Force version, a combined version. Yeah, that one's easy.
So every ranch has his own plan.
Yes.
I mean, his own.
And they're also supposed to coordinate them.
Oh.
So, we create during the interwar period what are called the rainbow plans, okay? Why? Because they're color coded. So for instance, Plan Black was war against Germany. Now I'm not expecting you to remember what country these went to, okay? Just showing you. Plan Blue, defend the continent. Plan Green, Plan Orange.
Again, Japan.
Purple, red. Yeah, we were planning for everything.
Well, you can never trust the British.
That's, I'm more concerned with us Canadians. You gotta, okay.
Is there a plan?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure there was, I just don't have that one. And white, which I had to put gray because otherwise it wouldn't appear on the screen.
Is it like a Central American country invading us or us invading?
Us invading them.
Oh,
Yeah.
As I
Okay.
say that, I'm paranoid.
Yeah, that would
I was
really
like,
be
how
paranoid.
did
Like, Central America, like Mexico.
No, Mexico's
Honduras,
separate. So this is Honduras,
Honduras,
Belize, Nicaragua, El Salvador, all the way down to Panama.
Hey, Mexico has.
Yeah, they got their own special plan.
Nice. I want to be honored.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So, they have these plans, and then in 1938, the decision is made, you know what? We're looking at the world, and the world is not as simple as this. Because in almost every scenario in 1938, you're going, well, it's not just going to involve Germany, or it's not just going to involve Japan. It's actually going to be a combination. So we shuffle the plans together, and we have to readjust. And then we call them Rainbow 1, Rainbow 2, because we're mixing the colors like a rainbow, okay? And we number them. Now we're only gonna look at one because it's the only one that matters for us. It's the one that comes closest. It doesn't get it exactly right, but it's the one that comes closest to World War II, and that is Rainbow 5. So Rainbow 5 is the plan that came closest. What does it look like? Rainbow 5 says the Brits and the French are gonna be our allies. Well, that's not exactly brain science, you know, brain surgery, rocket science. Sorry, I don't do science.
Rocket surgery.
Or rocket surgery and brain science. We had them as our allies last time, so it was okay. Germany and Italy are going to be our main focus. Okay. What we're going to do is try to project our power into the Eastern Atlantic, along with either or Africa, Europe. Okay. Again, not exactly crazy. We're going to be on the strategic defensive in the Pacific until we finish here and we can transfer more troops and resources to the Pacific. And this, as I say, is the basis for wartime strategy. We get it mostly right. There is no vision that the French are going to get knocked out of the war so quickly.
No vision that Russia's gonna join us either.
No, there's no discussion of Russia.
Can you look at the other rainbows?
Yeah, they're out there. There've been books written about them. Yeah, I don't have them on my slides, but yeah, they're out there.
You think they would ask questions about like, hey, America, I know this plan to invade the UK. What's up?
Well, no, I mean,
I'm sure bet they have.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Brits have a plan correspondingly to deal with us. I mean, they would be foolish not to. I mean, again, you make a plan just so you got something. God forbid a crisis happens.
Like Batman or Justice League.
I don't know. I'm not sure that's exactly the example I've used, but yeah, that's the
He has
same
contingency
principle.
plans to take them
It
out.
is.
It's the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
principle's the
that's
same.
Doom.
Yeah, just
The principle's the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so and again, there are a number of books called, like there's books called The Rainbow Plans or War Plan Orange, which was the Japanese one, or so there's a whole bunch of those. War Plan Orange, actually, the very first draft of War Plan Orange is like 1906. They didn't call it War Plan Orange at that time, but the very first one of War Against Japan is 1906. So we were already thinking of Japan being an enemy that early. What's significant about 1906? They're in the middle of a war with Russia, the Russo-Japanese war, and showing that they should be taken seriously. So that's why 1906 is the date. It's in the middle of a war there, and the Americans are going, holy moly. The Japanese are fighting Russia to a standstill, the largest country on earth, both geographically and population-wise in those days.
To be fair, it was Russia.
It was, but still, I mean, geographically and population-wise, biggest country in the world. Now, they're still geographically the biggest country. Yes, this is before other things happened. Right?
I mean, what are the odds that Japan's not launched an attack on a U.S. base?
That's the thing, yeah. I mean, what? And by the way, the vision for what they were going to do was attack the Philippines. Nobody assumed they would attack Hawaii. The assumption was they would attack the Philippines, and then we'd have to race to the Philippines, not the attack on Hawaii. That was nobody envisioned that. Now, the Washington Naval Treaty has just expired. Okay, it's January 1932. The Washington Naval Treaty has just expired. So what do the major navies that we talked about, plus I'm going to add Germany, because now Germany is about to elect a new chancellor. Little guy's got this weird Charlie Chaplin mustache. And so things are going to change pretty quick after that guy becomes chancellor of Germany. Okay, so what do they look like? Aircraft carriers, battleships, battle cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. So this is what the big four look like. Obviously, Germany is still operating under the Treaty of Versailles, so she has no subs, she has no carriers. The 4 battleships she's allowed to keep are just really old, kind of decrepit ones. The Scharnhorst, the Gneisenau, stuff like that. So mostly cruisers and destroyers. You can see the others. Japan, having for a relatively small nation, geographically small, and a resource poor nation, has a very impressive navy. Now, not as impressive as either the Brits or us, but still very impressive given what resources she has and stuff. And in submarines, at least, she's ahead of the Brits. Okay, so let's take those numbers and look at those alongside the numbers in 1939 when the war actually breaks out. So I'm going to have a slash mark, and the one number is that you just saw, and the second number is 1939, 7 years later. So how much does it change between 32 when the treaty ends and 39 when the war begins? All right, same categories. Carriers. The Germans are building a carrier when the war breaks out. Okay? And the problem is, once the war breaks out, a carrier takes a massive amount of resources. And so basically what happens is the German war industry needs those resources desperately in other places. And so the hull is built, but that's it. So her hull, it's the Graf Zeppelin. That's what they were going to call it. She was going to be called the Graf Zeppelin. And the Graf Zeppelin just sits there unfinished in a shipyard. And when the war is over, that shipyard is overrun by the Russians. So they drag the Graf Zeppelin back to Russia, and she's eventually used as a target. They anchor her in the Baltic and just blast away at her until she sinks. And she's at the bottom of the Baltic Sea right now. Okay, battleships. The Germans finally decommissioned 2 of those really decrepit old ones because they're not really worth it. Cruisers, battle cruisers. So again, not learning from the Jutland lesson, the Germans decide, well, battleships are too expensive, but we could build battle cruisers with the thinner armor and the faster speed with the serious armament. That'd work. No. Cruisers, destroyers. I cannot account for why the Japanese number dropped so drastically. I do not know what happened. We start mothballing our World War I destroyers, and then remember we make a deal with the Brits where we sell them 50 old destroyers in exchange for basing rights in the Pacific and the Caribbean. So that's the basis for destroyers deal that you've probably heard of. So most of these are going to wind up getting turned over to the Brits in the next year. 1940, yeah, I think it's 1940 that happens, okay? And submarines. Wow, that that accelerated fast. As I told you though,
They already,
they were already training. They'd already been training in Sweden throughout the interwar period. They took submarine crews and they made them the equivalent of PT boat crews. The PT boats are motor torpedo boats that we have. The Germans do have them. They call them E-boats. But they make all their submarine crews from World War I E-boat crews during the interwar period. And then they frequently go on vacations to Sweden, where they tour Swedish naval bases and they go on pleasure cruises on Swedish submarines. So they are training the whole time, and then in 35 or 36, when Hitler says we're not honoring the Treaty of Versailles anymore, the first German U-boats are all built in Sweden. So that's what it looks like. Now, what was under construction in 39? This is what they have, okay? But what are they still building but not finished in 39? Okay? So what's under construction? Carriers. Technically that should be a 1 for Germany. They just never finish it. Battleships. Cruisers, all classes. Heavy, light, you name it. Destroyers and submarines. Again, look at the fact that Japan is only in the single digits in every category. And again, as I mentioned, and I think you already understand, that's not because they don't want more ships, that is because they literally do not have the resources to build more ships. Not monetary resources, literal resources. Steel, coal, iron, they don't have them. And that's one of the reasons they will claim they are justified in attacking Pearl Harbor is, a few months before Pearl Harbor, we ban the export of metals to Japan.
And you know, oil also?
Oil too, yeah. Because we were exporting ore, iron ore and other stuff to Japan, and they were using that to build ships. And so because of their aggression in China, the US Congress, the President and the Congress get together and ban oil exports, we ban metal exports, etc. And they use that as a justification. They claim, by doing that, you actually declared war on us. Last time I checked, no, that's not actual, that's trade talks. You know, that's not an act of war. Okay.
But you know, the funny thing is that Japan knows that they can, you know, beat the United States.
They thought they could, yeah.
Yeah, until the last minute they say we could. We have a you know, a very small chance.
Well, it depends how you talk to them. Yamamoto thought they had a small chance.
Yeah.
They themselves thought, oh, we could easily beat the Americans because they're weak and decadent and, you know, all that stuff.
And we have the samurai.
Exactly, that whole Bushido code. Now let's focus just on US and Japan, and in December 1941, what do the two navies look like in the month we get attacked, the month the war for us breaks out, okay? So this is the number we have on hand. This is the number under construction at that exact moment. So we have 7 carriers and 11 under construction. Japanese have 8 and 8, okay? Battleships, heavy cruisers, light cruisers, and by the way, this includes 6 anti-aircraft cruisers that were specifically designed just to protect carriers and destroyers. I couldn't find subs for this category. I don't know why, but they didn't list subs. Okay? You can't hide this kind of construction. You know what I'm saying? This isn't like you can build a factory and build tanks or aircraft in secret. These are giant ships. You can't do this in secret. The Japanese have spies in the United States. It's not real hard to get close enough, snap a few pictures, send those home. They know what we're building. So when they attack us, when they initiate the war, is almost completely based on, they're looking at these numbers, they're looking at these numbers, and they're going, if we give the Americans a year, 2 years more, we have no chance in hell. The number in parentheses is under construction. This is what we have, this is under construction, okay? So they're looking at these numbers and they got pictures. I wouldn't be surprised if every single one of these ships under construction. And they look at these numbers and then they look at their own and they go, we better beat them real quick, because if we don't, we're screwed.
How did they, you said like during 1939 they were already building it. How did Roosevelt convince Congress to give all this money to build? Because you said like we're not going to get in the war, right?
Right. So Roosevelt does a lot of what we talked about earlier. I'm creating jobs. Okay, so I'm creating jobs, so that's good. He also makes the argument that the world is becoming very violent and dangerous, and we need to protect ourselves. It's not about attacking, it's about defense. In fact, he echoing President Wilson from World War I, before we joined, armed neutrality becomes the watchword prior to our entry into the war. We're going to be neutral, but we're going to be able to guarantee our neutrality, like Switzerland. Switzerland has been neutral for like 500 years. Why? Because, there's air quotes, and these are to be around neutral, because they make always a lot of money off the wars that happen in Europe. But as far as the military is concerned, they've always been neutral. Why have they been able to stay neutral? Well, geography. It's a huge reason. But also, the Swiss are armed to the teeth.
They're the Americans of Europe.
In a certain sense, yes. I mean, if you're talking developed nations, the largest gun ownership after the United States in the world is the Finns and the Swiss, and I can never remember which one's higher and which one's lower. Those are two countries that have been neutral for a long time, but have been willing to fight for their neutrality. Finns in World War II, the Swiss in every war for the last 500 years. Okay? So in Switzerland, until the last 10 years, and I think they finally changed the law, until the last 10 years, every male had to go in and do basic training and serve in the reserves for like 10 years. Every single man. And when you finished your basic training and what we would call AIT, Advanced Individual Training, you went home not just with a uniform, but with a rifle. Your actual issue rifle was in your closet along with a tin of ammunition. And I've seen photos of these. It looks like a giant sardine can. Okay? And it literally is stamped on the top, do not open unless ordered to do so. So they had, again, up until about 10 years ago, every single male from like 18 to 20 something has a fully automatic capable rifle in their closet and a tin of ammo in their closet, along with their uniform. So that's how they managed to remain neutral for so long. Geography helped, let's be honest. They wouldn't have been neutral if they were as flat as Poland. Okay, the mountains helped. But, so Roosevelt pushes this, we're gonna have armed neutrality too. We're gonna be neutral, we're not taking sides, which is not true, we were totally on the British side from day one. But, the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna have a tough enough Navy and Army that they can't mess with us. So that's how they sell it. That's how they sell it.
I had a quick question. It's
Yes.
off topic, but in Switzerland, do they have mass shootings?
I
I know nowhere is near.
Yeah, it's
US,
exceptionally
but-
rare.
Okay.
Every year they're required to pre-qualify with their issued assault rifle, and they have a very strong culture where civilians are invited to come to range days. And
Yeah.
they all get to use those guns from like little kids to like old people and men.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and if you're firing your issue rifle, they'll give you ammo for free. If you wanted to shoot every Saturday, for instance,
Keep supplying.
you just fill out the paperwork and they'll issue you ammo, and you can. I'm sure there's a max. They're not going to let you shoot 10,000 rounds a week.
I get a little
but-
concerned. As
Yeah,
someone's going like
yeah,
this.
that would be a little concerning. But I mean, there's a number, and if let's say I'm just gonna throw out a number, like 100. Okay, and if you wanted to fill out the paperwork and every Saturday go to a range, and there's tons of ranges in Switzerland too. If you wanted to shoot 100 rounds and the max was 100 rounds, they would issue it to you. You just fill out the paperwork, and when you show up at the range, turn in the paperwork, and they would issue your 100 rounds. You go plink away.
That's the country to be in. Zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, there you go. Oh no, yeah, especially because of the mountains.
Yeah, right.
And the bunkers.
Yeah.
That's right, lots of bunkers. So now remember, this is the total strength, but remember, the argument was we have 2 oceans to cover. And so do the Brits. But the Japanese, remember, said, you guys are gonna tag team on us. I know it's gonna happen. And we said, no, that'll never happen. We don't tag team, we tri team. Because the Dutch are also in the Pacific. Because remember, what is today Indonesia was the Dutch East Indies. Okay? And interestingly enough, my parish priest, his father was born, he's Dutch, and his father was born in the Dutch East Indies. And unfortunately spent all of World War II in a POW camp, basically. Okay? So, what were the strengths like when you had Brits and the Americans and the Dutch versus the Japanese? Aircraft carriers, okay, they definitely have an advantage there. Battleships, heavy cruisers, light cruisers, destroyers, and subs. Okay? So, advantage them, slight advantage us, advantage them, slight advantage us, slight advantage them, advantage us. So it's almost parity, which is what the Japanese said was gonna happen, and we said, no, it's not gonna happen. That's exactly what happened. The Dutch helped us over the hump though there. I know it's a small contribution, but they did help us over the hump there.
Well, you know, Hitler also said he wouldn't invade Czechoslovakia, and
There's that too,
Yeah.
yes. So, I want to end with two quotes, and then we'll move on to our next lesson. Okay? We're talking about innovation. We're talking about, when we talked about tanks, we're talking about innovation. We're talking about aircraft carriers, we're talking about innovation. But here's something else to think about with innovation. And I think there's a lot of truth to this. You can be this visionary guy, but if you don't have a means of turning your vision into reality, what good is it?
Just ask Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Please.
oh no, I was saying I didn't have a question. Sorry.
Yeah. So no, I mean, that's the thing. You've got to have not just vision, but you've got to have a way of turning that vision into reality. And without that, it's...
like electric cars. I mean, sounds nice on paper, but in reality, you have to wait like 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and again, no, that some of these innovations, even that people love, Tesla is a very, despite now some people turning against him because of Twitter, because of the whole Twitter thing, people still love the Tesla, but it has a serious limitation. It takes, you can't just stop at a gas station and fill up the tank. You know, it's a car that's designed really for an urban environment, not for long road trips. Yeah, you know, stuff like that. So, and then even then, if you wanted to take a trip, are there powering stations along the route, even if you were willing to stop for 30 minutes at a time?
The GPS suggests like where you can find.
I saw a video about that. Like if you're doing a road trip from like New York to California, they'll have every single charging like on your route for you if you want it.
Right.
It's kind of cool.
It is cool, but I bet it's not the shortest distance
Yeah.
either.
No.
So how many hours did you just add to your cross-country trip because of that? But
And
yeah,
first of all, why you go cross country in a Tesla?
yeah.
Also, you're
Rent a
already
car.
doing across the country. Who cares what it does on?
Yeah.
One takes 100 hours, one takes 95 hours.
Well, I'm going to be taking a trip back to Chicago this summer, which I haven't been back
By car?
to my hometown. Yes, but not by a Tesla. You can't afford a Tesla. By a minivan, which is what you'd think a middle-aged dude with kids would be driving. But I can tell you, I'm trying to take the shortest possible route because I want to be with my kids in that, and the two dogs in that car the shortest possible time.
This wouldn't be a problem if you had high-speed trains.
Okay. Well,
Well, you can take a train from San Antonio to Chicago.
yeah,
But
I
then it's
I probably could, but then what about the dogs? What about all the crap we're bringing with? And we're going to be making multiple stops along the way to visit people.
Hey, but it's about the memories.
Yeah, painful memories for me. And supposedly kids always have positive memories, and when I think back to all the trips I made with my parents because I wasn't driving,
Yeah, I used to love it.
no, that was great.
I
And I'm
can
sure
remember
my
those
daughters
trips.
will come away with just wonderful, warm childhood memories they'll have hopefully for the next 80 years. Hopefully they'll live
How
that
old are your
long.
children right now?
11 and 12.
Yeah, go on a couple podcasts, you know?
Yeah, there you go.
Put on Bluey?
Oh, please, be good.
They're past that. Yeah.
Okay.
And a moment of Zen, again from the same author, but I think this is also on a good point. You can have the right idea, and it can be completely rejected at the time. Not because people are necessarily reactionary, but because they're going to show you, no, you can't be right. Haven't you seen this chart? Look, here you are. Here's where you need to be. No, that's not going to work. And in the end, you could turn out to be completely right. But the data at the time said you couldn't.
Well, you break it down like that, you can make that argument for literally anything.
Right, but that's my point. When you're trying to innovate, and you've got this vision, people are going to attack it, rightly or wrongly. They're going to attack it. They're going to find plausible data to say, no, we shouldn't do that. Okay? Maybe because of money, maybe because they're wedded to the old way of doing things, maybe because of bureaucracy. We could find a dozen different reasons they do that. But it's true. So I'm old enough to remember when personal computers were an absolutely new, cutting-edge thing. Well, I gotta tell you, until the internet came along, personal computers were, okay, you could type, you could do like Word, Excel, that kind of stuff.
You play Doom?
You could play, there were a few early games that you could play.
The
But-
Oregon Trail.
Yeah, oh yeah, you died of dysentery. But until the internet came along, quite frankly, personal computers, they were great for business. They could play a few games.
That's it.
That was kind of it. It's really the internet that made personal computers just go off the charts. So before you have the internet, yeah, it's cool. I mean, I was in school, so I had one to type stuff, and yeah. No, I was lucky. I took a typing course in high school on an actual typewriter. I can use all my fingers. So I'm not super fast, but, well, now you have voice to text. You don't even have to worry about it. But yeah, so there are always going to be legitimate, reasonable arguments against your vision. That doesn't mean you're not going to be right in the end, but you're going to get opposition. And again, it's not personal. Sometimes it is, but in some other cases, people are just, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Women voted? What's that about?
Yeah, a crazy notion. Come on, what are people thinking? No, but I mean, you see what I'm getting at? Okay, there's always going to be legitimate reasons to say, no, that's not going to happen, or that's too complicated, or that's too expensive, or that won't work. And so we should always give people in the past a bit of a, what should I say? I don't want to give them a pass, but we should always
Benefit of the doubt?
understand. What's that?
Benefit of a doubt?
Yeah, benefit of the doubt, exactly. We should give them the benefit of the doubt because they probably had good reasons for thinking it wasn't going to work. Speaking of things that weren't going to work, if God had wanted you to fly, He'd have given you wings, okay? And when you look at what the Wright brothers flew, could you envision transcontinental transportation in jets? No, not unless you were really visionary.
Okay, I don't know who these people are, but if it's in French, English, German.
Italian, English, American.
Oh,
So, close.
one out of three.
So, this is Giulio Due, who was the first man to write about the idea of using bombers in warfare. This is Hugh Trenchard, the first man to use bombers in warfare. Before this guy wrote about it, we'll talk about how this guy basically stole all his ideas, but because he wrote it first, he gets all the credit. And Billy Mitchell, United States Airman Billy Mitchell, who
Was hated by everybody he met.
pretty much, yeah, because he was quite frankly a jerk. I'd use a different word, but you could use several different words, but he was a jerk.
Was it because he was overly enthusiastic about artsy
Why
playing?
he has
Yes.
so many decorations?
Yeah, he's basically, he's doing what you don't do in the United States, and these are all foreign decorations.
Okay.
And by the way, it's pretty rare, the Marines do it on their full dress uniform where they wear the actual medals as opposed to just a ribbon wrap.
Those are the alphas, anything you have a medal for, you wear on this side, anything that does not have a medal, you wear the ribbons on the opposite side. And
Right.
you're not authorized to wear that in public.
Yeah. So the Army doesn't do this, but regs were real loose in those days. So he's wearing all his foreign decorations around his neck because they're all really cool neck ribbons. And he's wearing the long version, which again, is not, he was a pompous ass.
Reminds me of a little
Like a dictatorship or?
Yeah.
reminds me of like North Korean officers who had those old medals on
Oh
them.
my gosh, the North Koreans are the worst.
Yeah.
They put them all over, I've never seen them on the sleeves, but I've seen them literally all the way down to the belt.
I'm
the
like, why
entire-
is this medal for?
It's
No.
basically for being a good boy and not getting shot in the back
No,
of the
you
head.
don't understand. The medals add extra armor to my heart.
Well, that's, and in North Korea, that's not a bad idea. Okay, so, the airplane before World War I. In 1909, the first airplane is purchased by the Army, but they have absolutely no mission for it. They have no idea what they're gonna do with it. And this is what it is. This is the actual one. This is the Wright 1909 Flyer.
Oh, I've seen that one.
Yeah, this particular photo is from the U.S. Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson in Ohio. Better than the Air and Space Museum.
Oh, yeah, the air space music sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I think you're being a little harsh, but.
I was in 8th grade. when I
Well,
learned
yeah,
to
as an
go.
8th grader, yeah, I could see that. But the Air Force Museum, the best museum that nobody goes to, because it's in Dayton, Ohio. Okay, so I've been to Dayton, Ohio. There's no reason to go there other than this museum.
Isn't there a NASCAR event?
There's a what?
Isn't there a NASCAR event in Dayton, Ohio?
There might be. I don't
So
know.
you go to a
there is.
NASCAR event, and then you can go to the museum? That's
Yeah.
something dated.
That's-
That's
Yeah.
a dated
Wasting
thing.
time there.
That's a hell of a weekend right there.
Ohio's a mean state, anyways.
So that's the 1909 Wright Flyer. You can notice it doesn't have wheels. It has skids. It lands on skids. You have to set up this long kind of track in the field. Then you put the plane on the track. Then you rev up the engine. Then you take off. And then landing is on these skids. So it's kind of a rough landing every time. But that's the first one we buy. And we managed to kill one of the two Wright brothers in one of the training flights. I can't remember if it's Orville or Wilbur. One of the two of them gets killed training an Army pilot.
Nobody ever mentions Catherine Wright, the sister.
Is that the mom?
No, the sister.
Okay.
Who's actually instrumental in popularizing airplanes. Because like, they were brilliant inventors, not very charismatic. That's what Catherine.
Usually what happens. The engineers are not,
Very good marketers.
yeah, they're not very good marketers. You need somebody else to market your stuff.
Catherine was pivotal.
Well, the engineer's not awkward.
Yes, that's just by their nature. They can't help it. So this is a slightly later model. Notice it has wheels, so we've improved. And this is the first experiment in arming an aircraft. There's the pilot. There's a soldier. I don't know. I can't tell what rank. I probably an officer, but I can't tell. And he's literally going up with a 1903 Springfield rifle. I can't tell if he has any seatbelt of any kind.
And they wonder why men live so less.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason men have a shorter lifespan.
I think that's a corporal. Because the
Besides-
officers did that for a corporal ad. Look, go check it out.
Besides coronary disease, he's got one of his feet on one of the struts here. He's sitting on the wing. He's going to go up. He's turned his cap backward. Let's shoot at the ground.
I'm getting anxiety just.
So, in World War I, what's the U.S. Army Air Service? Because that's what it's known as. Remember, the first aircraft, after they think about what to do with it, they give it to the Signal Corps, thinking it'll take messages. Remember that? And then during the war, they go, oh no, it has to be separate. We create the Air Service. So, we have no modern combat aircraft when we enter the war. Why? Because technology in Europe has changed so rapidly They went to war with planes looking not much better than this, but by 1917, they've taken almost a generational leap in how good the aircraft are. So we haven't been bothering to keep up because we're not in the war. There's no money being pumped into it. So all the aircraft we own in 1917 are basically junk. You can use them to train pilots, but you can't send them into combat. In July, we receive all our combat aircraft from France and Britain. So if you're an American pilot who fights in World War I, you are flying a British aircraft or a French aircraft. One of the two. Because as I said, there are no American aircraft. Congress finally gets around to funding making a real air service in July 1918. We entered the war in April 1917. Okay, so they took a year and 3-4 months, and then they authorized funds for 16,000 aircraft and 30,000 engines. You might be asking, why so many engines? Because you replace engines a lot. And it's also easier to keep the planes flying is to take the whole engine out, fix it, and put in a new already fixed engine. And they still do that today, by the way. They still do that today. By the end of the war, this is what the air service looked like. More pilots than planes, because it's really easy to wreck one of these planes. Now the good thing is, if you wreck it near the ground, like you're not in a tailspin, but you wreck it like as you're slightly taking off, as you're landing, they're moving so slow, you actually have a pretty good chance of surviving a crash. Unlike today, unless you can punch out. Or is it down? I never even remember. Whichever. You pull from the bottom, pull from the top.
Unless you
Find good chance.
Better than 50-50.
to let the goose.
Well, that could be anywhere from 90 to 51.
It's only been 40 years, man. It's only been 40 years. So yes. So that's what we look like. They did not get around to this 3 months later or 4 months later when the war ended. Now, what is the life expectancy of a World War I pilot? The only number I could find was a British pilot. So I'm sorry, I can't give you an American number. I can only give you a British number. The life expectancy of a British pilot in World War I is 17 and a half flying hours. That's the life expectancy. Because what generally happens, and this is not quite as drastic in World War II, but there's similarities in World War II, is if you make it through your first few missions, there's a good chance you're going to make it long term. Most guys don't make it through their first few missions. First, usually about 3 missions. Culls out a lot of guys. So it's one of these, like infant mortality screws up the long term when you do that,
Like the median.
Yeah, the median or the mean, or I could never remember what those were. It's the same thing here. The guy who dies 30 minutes into his first flight pulls down the guy who's been around for 100 hours. So now we average 30 minutes, 100 hours, now you're down to 50.
So kind of how I noticed say most people eat like 3 spiders at night across their mouth.
I've never
And
heard
when in reality,
that.
it's just one guy eating 10,000 spiders.
I've never heard that, and that's both creepy and disgusting, and I hope that never happens. I'm usually snoring so loud, I'm hoping that keeps the spiders away. So
Spiders enjoy warm and moist places.
My defensive mechanism is my snores, so I'm gonna hope that keeps up. What's amazing is by the end of the First World War, the first time we're using aircraft, almost all the missions that we would use aircraft for today, we've already done. So almost anything you could do with an aircraft, they've already done by the end of World War I.
With space travel.
There's certain things they haven't done. Okay? And most of the things they haven't done are because it's not like oxygen. We don't have closed, they're not sealed cockpits, so you don't need oxygen because you're not going to go that high because you know ahead of time you're not going to go that high. Air-to-air refueling, that'll be in the interwar period. There's a few other ones, but that's most of the missions aircraft do today. We've already done it. We've already done them. And yeah, we'll refine them, we'll make them better, but we've done them all. Now, what will we add to that? In the interwar period, I'm not talking post-World War II, because that's way. But in the interwar period, I'd add 5, just in case you're curious. I'd add 5. I'd say radar, because we hadn't invented it yet, so we'll invent it in the interwar period. Voice radio, okay, because it's in sealed cockpits and oxygen. More guns, and more improved engines. So, yeah, we'll do that stuff later, but again, we did just about everything technologically you could do in World War I. We had done it, look. We'd done just about everything you were technologically capable of doing, we did. Air-to-air refueling we probably could have done, but just I don't think anybody even thought of it, okay? And then in the interwar period, we do these other things, and so not bad. Not bad. By the way, the first experiments in the US for air-to-air refueling, no joke, involves 2 planes flying at the exact same speed and one guy putting a garden hose down to the guy below. And the guy on above having a funnel and gas cans. And I'm not making this up. And pouring gas cans full of fuel down, and the other guy holding it over the engine, or the gas tank.
Amazing.
Yeah, these guys had to be soaked in gasoline. No smoking.
Assuming they had sufficient fuel and munitions, could a single AC-130 win World War II?
No. I mean, you mean no.
Sure.
It's a wonderful aircraft. Don't get me wrong. AC-130 is a transport aircraft, and AC-130 is a transport aircraft where they fitted it with guns that fire out the side. These are what gunships sometimes. I know sometimes you mean helicopters when you say gunships, but these are fixed-wing gunships, and they're amazing.
Oh, they're crazy.
Yeah, they're what they can do is amazing. They usually fly like night missions, so they're basically invisible to the enemy, and you can call them in, and they provide devastating fire.
I think there's a 130 over A10 that has a gun so powerful it fired too long, but plane would actually flip over.
Yes, it is pretty powerful. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, strategic bombing. This whole thing of strategic bombing. What is it? What's it about? The idea here, and that a number of people are going to put forward, is that we can win a war by bombing the enemy into submission.
That's not.
Yeah, we know now, and probably they should have known that it won't work. Okay, but let's look at the problems of this. At the strategic level, you have to find something that they term the center of gravity. What do I mean by that? I mean, you have to find this thing that if I destroy it, it is going to collapse your country. So what is your center of gravity? Well, the problem is, in theory, every nation has a different center of gravity. So I'm not talking finding like, there it is on the map. I'm talking about, let's stand back and philosophically think about the United States. What is the center of gravity in the United States? As opposed to what the center of gravity of Canada is, as opposed to what the center of gravity of Mexico is, as opposed to, so that's a rather ginormous problem. Having to determine what the center of gravity, the thing that motivates this entire country is.
Well,
That's huge.
we could say that Washington DC, but just you bomb the area, but if the politicians just move to another place.
Yeah, but see, I would argue, you're thinking really more tactically.
Oh.
That
Because-
was like the oil refinements, like in Texas City.
It could.
Oh, yeah. Nuclear plant.
Well, yeah, and then you create collateral damage. Is that what you were
My
gonna
mom
say?
was at the Strategic Air Command back in the '70s, and they said, yeah, Houston's target number 2 by the Soviets.
Really?
Because of the.
After Washington DC or New York?
After DC, because of the Houston shipyard.
Okay.
Where
That's
the
what
Houston
they-
port.
Okay.
Because of its.
That's what
Is it
main
just a ship?
campus in St. Thomas University has bunkers.
Yeah, I'm just gonna hope I get vaporized in the initial blast. I don't wanna live through the apocalypse. Yeah, I'm not going for the bunker. Yeah.
And you can get self-hypno down there. I
Yeah.
tried.
So, we gotta figure out what the thing is. What is the center of gravity, right? Then there's the moral issues. Like, is it acceptable to bomb people from the air to break their center of gravity because you're gonna kill some civilians?
Yeah.
That's not debatable. You are going to do it. It's a matter of how many. So that's a problem. How do you define victory? You might say, well, the other side quits. That's victory. Okay. Short of the other side saying, we give up, how do you know if you're even winning? See what I'm saying? So am I close? Am I almost there? Do I just have to do this for 2 more days, 2 more weeks, 2 more months, 2 more years?
It's like Germany's gonna be like, oh, we're almost out of food and our plants can't produce it anymore.
Yeah.
I
At
mean,
what point?
Even America, they entered World Late. They didn't suffer many casualties of the others, but they still lost tens of thousands of soldiers. I mean, to them on the field, how do they feel?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do we know if we're winning?
It's like in Kuwait that the Bush and after bombed the water plants and
Right.
the electrical plants,
Mhm.
and they thought that they were force the
Absolutely. Yeah.
to prevent it from doesn't work.
Yeah, no.
They,
Exactly.
people are stubborn.
Yeah.
It's like how do we define the war in Iraq?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
is
Or the
that
war in
a-
Afghanistan.
Is that a
Or-
victory or?
Yeah. If you're not talking a traditional, conventional ground war, that's pretty easy to tell if you're winning or losing. But every other kind of war, I don't know how close I am. So that's at the strategic level. At the operational level, I have to build enough airplanes to do this. That doesn't happen overnight. Which means I have to have infrastructure. Metal, coal, steel, I have to have rubber, I have to have all these things. And then air crews to crew them in. So that's not something that happens overnight. You don't decide, hey, tomorrow I'm gonna do this. Now, again, World War II, the United States managed to ramp up really quick. Could we do that now? We don't even make any steel in this country. Most of our steel is imported from Japan. Not China, Japan. Actually, the Japanese make excellent steel.
And the aluminum, it comes from China too? Or?
I don't know about the aluminum. I know the steel comes from Japan. We've got an intelligence problem, and that is targeting and bomb assessment. So, okay, we have to have intelligence that's good enough to turn this into an actual target. And then we have to have intelligence good enough to tell us, are we actually hitting the target? And even if we're hitting the target, are we making any difference? In World War II, and this is the last thing I'll say because we're out of time. In World War II, we're bombing German factories. And when we go over and take the aerial photographs, it's just the walls, the roof, and everything's gone. What we don't understand is the machinery is so large and so sturdy that they literally, within a couple days, clean things up and have the workers go back in and they just have to wear coats while they work on the assembly line. Because the machinery isn't destroyed. The building's destroyed. But as long as they can still feed power into that machinery and still get some raw materials in, those people are punching out whatever they're doing, or they're grinding, or because the machinery itself is so sturdy, the bombs don't destroy it.
It's a great ad.
German engineering, there you go. The famous Volkswagen ad with the terrorist. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
What?
The banned ad. Volkswagen does an ad for, I forget, the Jetta, whatever car it was. And it's a terrorist